Hi everyone, my name is Tom Adams and I'm the Managing Director of Lean Data.
Oh, sorry. Hi, I'm Kat Harrison and I work in the Lean Data team.
And now's the really exciting part of the day where we're going to get into numbers and charts and diagrams, and we're going to talk to you about the impact of our work, in particular with respect to energy. Before we do that, before we dive into data itself, let me tell you a bit more about Lean Data, this approach to data collection that Acumen has founded. Impact measurement in general is not a great look. I can go into the deep reasons for that later, but it tends to be a compliance requirement pushed down on companies or not-for-profits by founders and foundations and funds. So no one really wants to do it. It's heinously expensive. It takes a lot of time, and it's not working. There's lots of people good people working in this sector, but as a system, impact measurement, monitoring and evaluation is broken. So we wanted to do something a little different, and we invented Lean Data at Acumen. Lean Data has the following principles. It's first and foremost rooted in customer voice. The Acumen manifesto starts standing with the poor, listening to voices unheard. So that seemed, when we were building Lean Data, a pretty good place to start. And we wanted to scale Acumen's ability to listen to customers. That's not always an easy thing to do. There's a reason why M&E, impact measurement, is difficult. It's typically expensive. It's complicated. So we invested very heavily in mobile and technology-based approaches to collecting data, and have been practicing and testing and working out how to use phone calls and IVR and SMS and online to collect really high-quality impact data for the last 4 years. We spend a lot of time with surveys. That's not a very sexy thing to do at first blush, but surveys are a problem. There is no way to Google good surveys. It's really curious to me. You can't say, well, I want a survey to understand the impact of coffee farming on smallholder farmers in war-torn, previous FARC regions of Colombia. I don't know how to get one of those. And so everyone is inventing their own surveys. They're all doing it. And they're either making quite often bad surveys, or everyone's got different surveys, and so no one can compare any of this data, and that's a problem. So we spend a lot of time with surveys. We spend a lot of time hopefully crafting good surveys that can be repeated across companies and start to create standardized data. And the last thing we do with Lean Data is we don't just don't collect data on social information. We think the chance to talk to customers is a chance to drive as much value for the companies we work with as possible, so we collect a blend of social and wider business metrics. So that's what Lean Data is. I'm happy to answer questions about it. And it's been growing. What's really exciting is I think it's something that we at Acumen is starting to really see a lot of value in our own portfolio. In the last 4 years, but particularly in the last year, it's been really starting to scale. We've done 190 projects, more than 100 in the last year. In the process of that, we've spoken to almost 60,000 low-income customers to understand what their lived experience is. We're starting to see some real interest in Lean Data from across our sector. Folks like Acumen Network, Enjaro, DFID, CDC, Energy Access Ventures, Soros Economic Development Fund, and others have come to us and said, it seems to be working for you. Would you work with us to collect data about impact? And we've been published in Stanford Social Innovation Review. And just this year, Harvard Business School has a case study on Lean Data, which is particularly exciting. So Lean Data is working, and I think starting to grow.
Sorry. Yeah, no worries. So for the last year and a half, we decided we need to focus in on our energy sector. So you've already heard Sachin talk about it particularly. We wanted to have a deep dive into that sector through Lean Data and really learn what we could find out across our whole portfolio and a bunch of companies outside as well. So we did Lean Data surveys and adapted all that we'd learned and those questions, and we aligned with sector metrics and indicators to make sure that we could provide all these insights that were useful beyond just our portfolio. And we did Lean Data surveys with 21 energy companies, solar home system companies, improved cook stove companies, mini-grid companies. 7,500 surveys later, and 750,000 data points later. I'm not sure how we calculated that. And these are the logos, where's Ajata as well, Frontier Markets, the logos of our portfolio companies. So now the journey on the data begins. But happily, we've got to talk back and then tea after us. So,
sorry, do you want this now?
Okay, I'll have this. So at big picture, what we saw across doing this energy Lean Data focus, these are 9 of our core indicators. I don't expect you to read them, don't worry. But just to highlight 3. So we found that 3/4 of the customers of our energy companies were accessing modern energy for the first time when they bought their new solar home system or connected to their mini-grid. We found nearly 2/3 of customers say that their quality of life had improved, their well-being had improved by having this access. But we also wanted to focus not just on proving impacts, but on improving impacts. So what could we learn about opportunities for the companies to improve, to do better, to serve their customers better? And we found that 1/4 of customers were experiencing challenges using their new energy product or service. And that affects both business opportunities and scale, but also impact and customers' ability to properly use their product or service for best effect. And as you know, we've already talked about this too, but Acumen care very much about low-income consumers and families living in poverty. And we found, 3/4 of the customers were low income, but we really look at this 28 million, that dark orange part of the, is this a donut, a skinny donut? And those living in poverty, so those living below $3.10 per person per day. And what we've committed to as part of our Pioneer Energy Investing Initiative, we don't help ourselves out with all these names, do we? Is that we want that dark orange to zoom around to be half of that donut. We want to see if we can support our companies to improve and to reach 50% of their customer base who are really living in poverty. So big picture from an environmental point of view as well, we saw what we hope to see is that with families accessing improved solar products and home systems and solar lights, that they replace their use of dangerous and polluting kerosene lamps and open flame lighting. And that resulted in an estimated 6.4 million tons of carbon dioxide and black carbon emissions, which are the top 2 climate warmers, averted. So those emissions are no longer, and people have packed away their kerosene lamps and have safer, cleaner, healthier homes. Now, I've just talked a lot about the big aggregate, the big numbers, the averages, but what was most exciting about all of the work we did was actually all the insights we got at a company level, at a product or service level, looking at different countries, and then finding out what more we can learn to do better.
Yeah, we've kind of raced through the first part of lean data, what it is in big picture, because this is the part of lean data that really starts to excite me. This is the part where I feel like it really starts to hit home, because a lot of people will give you big numbers about their impact, and they'll say, look, it's all great, it's all wonderful. But actually the truth is, like financial returns, and like building financially sustainable companies, impact is messy too. It's not always good, sometimes it's bad, it's mixed. And to really understand impact, to actually start to learn rather than just assume what impact you're making, you have to listen to the customer, you have to start to be able to compare between companies. And that is, I think, quite shockingly, the exception rather than the norm in the impact investing space and the wider development space. So we collected a bunch of data on, one of the things that lean data always starts with is asking people what's important to them. So one of the things that we hear over and over again, we buy improved lighting and cooking products because it saves us money. And so we started to collect data on energy expenditure on a household level, and we can see that with standardized surveys about people's expenditure that it's different for different companies. And actually, some of our companies, I'm going to jump off stage, are down here. Actually, people are spending more on their energy after buying these products or service, although on average, our benchmark is a savings of $43 a year, and some are way out at the top. The other thing to say about this data is it's data from new customers and their experience in their first 6 months. So we might see some of this data change, as someone might be on a financing deal to pay off a solar home system, that to start with they spend more money, but in the longer term they start to save. Along with things like energy expenditure, impact is more than just how much you save. There are a whole load of other impacts that can come from getting a product or service like solar home system. We don't like to assume we know what's best for people. Again, that's rooted in Acumen's manifesto of listening to people. So we ask open-ended questions about what sorts of impacts people receive. And spider charts have a tendency to be a bit of a Marmite effect. So some people love them and some people absolutely hate them. So by the end of this, I hope to convert you to spider chartism, and you can all be spider chartists. But so let me just explain how these spider charts work before we go into some of our companies. So in a grey circle, grey pentagon is negative impact. There is a chance that despite our good intentions, despite our company's good intentions, that we make life worse for people. That is possible. Then in the grey area, the light grey area, there is your performance, and the vertical is your performance against the benchmark. So anywhere between 0% and 100%, you're creating impact, but you're not creating outsized impact. Someone else is doing it better than you. That's really interesting to us as an investor as well, because we don't want to just put our capital into okay social returns. We want to find the best social returns. And if you're above the benchmark, if you're up to 200%, maybe even beyond, then you're creating outside impact relative to your peers. So here are 3 companies in our energy portfolio. And there we have 21 of these spider charts, but it can get a bit overwhelming. You can't quite see it on a chart. And in each spider chart, there are 5 different things, different areas of impact that customers have said are important to them. We didn't choose these randomly. We didn't say, here is our framework, here's our theory of change that we're going to impose down on people and say what's important, because we've decided 3,000 miles away. We're going to listen to what people tell us is important. So things like improved safety and time savings. A couple of things to say here. One is how dramatically different these shapes are. And if you think about these shapes are a shape of social value. So you can start to compare visually which of our companies are more impactful. You can turn this into a composite index, and then you can put it in a ranking as well. But I quite like to start with a shape like this. And so you could take, and also not just are the shapes different, but the individual scores of different companies are very different. So take time savings. Here's a company, the company on the left here is doing okay. It's doing great. It was at the benchmark because of the average. That's terrific. The company in the middle is actually costing people time. It's making people's life worse. They've got a product or service that's too complicated to use. It says that it's going to save you time. It's not. It may be fuel efficient, but it's not time efficient, and people don't like that. And then the company on the far left is really outsized performance. They've got an efficient cook stove, but it's also really saving lots of people time. And you can see with product stacking, the performances are different. And so we can start to learn how our companies are doing, and also as an investor, and also tell our companies which areas they can improve in. Great, so that's us as an investor.
Yeah, so then when we focus in at a company level, what does it really mean and how do we use it? So I know you probably can't read the letters along the bottom, sorry. But these are our polar mountain benchmark charts. So every company got their own insights report on what their customers were saying, what they were telling us. But they also got a personalized benchmark report which told them how they're doing compared to their peers. So how their impact looks relative to that benchmark, that average across these other 21 companies. So the light blue, those triangles, are if you're around the benchmark. The navy is if you're outperforming, and the pink is if you're underperforming. So this gave an opportunity for us to talk to the companies and really identify opportunities or focus areas where they might want to pay a little more attention. And the best thing is a benchmark sort of binary. You're either outperforming or underperforming. But we can start to line up the companies and rank them. So each of those lines is a company. And then we can start to look at the companies that are far right, the high-performing ones. And this is a chart on customer satisfaction or net promoter score that I think some of you have heard us talk about. And we can start to look at what are the practices or strategies or business models these companies on the far end are doing, and how can we learn and share opportunities for design, for development, for delivery that we can share with some of the lower performing companies. So then we've talked a lot about measurement, but I think also a lot about what we really do with it. So just to summarize towards the end, so we're thinking about how do we use all of this data? What does it mean? How is it useful or actionable? So we think about from the customer's point of view, and sharing their voices and sharing the challenges they face means that our companies can start to address them and start to do better. From the company level, we can start to identify priorities with them or help them to identify those that we can then support them with and find ways for all of us to do better. And then for us as investors.
For Acumen, we can start to rank the performance of our companies, start to get smarter about which companies we're doubling down on, which companies we might need to try and turn around, where and why we deploy our capital. And maybe most exciting of all, for the sector more broadly, if we can build, this is the first benchmark for off-grid energy in the world about comparable data that anyone can use. We now hold this benchmark, and other organizations, as I said earlier, are coming to us to compare their performance against it. That doesn't exist, not just for energy, but basically anything in the international development sector in terms of customer-based data that is comparable across multiple interventions at the same time. That's very, very rare. So we can start to do this in energy, and we can start to hopefully build similar data sets for some of the other sectors we work in. This year we'll be looking at agriculture and financial inclusion. And the more these data sets start to be used, then more people can start to use these tools to compare their performance. And the ultimate goal of this, when this gets really good, is when capital that is scarce is going to the companies, to the not-for-profits that create the most impact in the world. Because I think we need to be as rigorous as that and not just assume all work is good, all charitable work is good, all impact investing work is good. We want our work to go to the best possible endeavors, and hopefully with more and more rigorous data we can achieve that. Thank you.